We don't need more debate on the issues, we need action. We don't need threats, we need consequences, and what we need is integrity and not politics.
Keean Bexte for Rebel News here at the Firewall Plus roundtable discussion being hosted by the Economic Education Association of Alberta. Danny Hozak, the chairman of this organization, has brought folks here from around Alberta, both politicians and academics, and even some politicians from Toronto, to come speak to Albertans here today about the results of Alberta's Fair Deal panel, a panel that suggested pulling Alberta's money out of the Canadian Pension Plan, creating Alberta Provincial Police Force, among other things. So today there are heavy hitters ranging from Jason Wilson, a county councillor from Wheatland County. He's the individual that actually created the Alberta First resolution that got traction before the Alberta Fair Deal panel actually came out with their results. We also have here today Derek Sloan, a Conservative candidate to replace Andrew Scheer's leader of the opposition and leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. I'm catching up with all of them here today to get their take on Alberta's separation and Alberta's sovereignty, as well as everything in between that and the status quo. We're here today at the Firewall Plus convention roundtable discussion here in Calgary. Can you give our viewers a bit of a understanding of what is going on here today?
Sure. Basically, this is our response to the Fair Deal panel report and the government's recommendation on how to implement the Fair Deal panel. And quite frankly, we thought the Fair Deal panel, even though they made some reasonable recommendations, the government's response was to study the best of them, on into the future. So we're actually talking about the Firewall Plus and making it happen, and sooner rather than later. A lot of these things that were recommended could be done in months, not in years, and we don't think we need a referendum on having our own police force, doing something about equalization, collecting our own income tax, having our own pension plan.
Why do you think Jason Kenney is something someone else said today here was hiding behind panels? Every day it's a new panel, a new way to analyze something from a different perspective. Where do you think do you think that it's paying off looking at this for so long rather than having concrete action?
Well, up until recently, stalling has been a reasonably successful political strategy, but it certainly isn't paying off for our country, and it isn't paying off for our province, and we think it's time to take some concrete action. If the government was supposed to be getting the oil out of Fort McMurray, we'd still be studying where Fort McMurray was.
All right, Danny, thanks so much for your time, and good luck with the conference today.
Thank you very much.
Jason, you were the individual that passed the Alberta First resolution in Wheatland County, which called for a bunch of measures of decentralization away from Ottawa and bringing a lot of power back to Alberta, including a provincial police force, pension plan, and what have you. And you said if this doesn't happen, we should support separation. You're here today at a Firewall convention, and there's a lot of talk of separation. Has your views on that changed? Are we closer to that, and would you support it?
I think we are a lot closer to that. I think those discussions that are happening all across Alberta, my motion included, and the unification of the Wild Rose Independence Party, all of that is building up, and I think we are getting a lot closer to maybe not independence, but creating a more autonomous provincial government, and hopefully we continue the decentralization from the province to the municipalities as well.
Do you support what Jason Kenney's doing right now with the Fair Deal panel and the recommendations that came from that?
Well, while I support most in principle, I think in my speech today I really laid out what we need from politicians. We don't need more debate on the issues, we need action. We don't need threats, we need consequences, and what we need is integrity and not politics, and that's what it's coming down to, and so far I haven't seen a lot of that from any of the current UCP MLAs except for Drew Barnes. So I look forward to hopefully more coming out of the woodwork, but let's not hold our breath.
The Wild Rose Independence Party of Alberta took a lot of their existing policy from the Freedom Conservative Party after a merger. As it exists now, does the party support independence, or is that something that has to be worked towards at conventions?
Well, you got to realize this is actually a merger between Wexit, which is very much wanting independence, and the Freedom Conservative Party, which wants to protect our freedoms. And what's critical right now is to realize there is no fair deal. I'm tired of people like, oh, we need a fair deal. There's no fair. We've got a signed contract in the Constitution that we signed in 1905, 1982. It's very flawed, but we signed it. And so if we want to make changes, we need to go through the right process. And there's some areas in there that we haven't been using our full autonomy that we can have, such things as immigration, such things as an Alberta pension plan, an Alberta police force. All of those things are constitutionally allowed, and we need to implement those things 20 years ago, yesterday, today. It needs to be done now. We can't continue on and act like somebody's going to give us a new fair deal, or that the RCMP are all of a sudden going to realize the problems we have in rural Alberta and reduce crime rate. It's escalating, and we need Alberta solutions here, and we need them from our governing people, not from Ottawa or some other distant place. And other areas that we maybe aren't constitutional that we need to take into is we need an Alberta Revenue Agency. One of the biggest problems in this country is taxation and the redistribution of wealth, and Alberta needs to actually be collecting our provincial and federal income tax and all other taxes, and then be sitting down at the bargaining table. People say, oh, you can't do that? Well, sometimes in life you have to do what you need to do and then ask for permission later. And to me, that's one of them. And then on top of that, probably the most critical thing, because the Easterners look at us like a dirty stepchild that's supposed to be doing the work in the back and bringing the milk after we milk the cow, is actually we need to be able to tell them that, well, no, we want to look after our own environment. And in 1930, Premier Brownlee fought with Ottawa, and we had the Resource Transfer Act, and we became equal with other provinces with that. But now Ottawa is infringing on our resources with environmental laws that are backwards. They're not serving the best interest of Canada or the world. And we need an Environmental Transfer Act, because we'll keep our pristine province beautiful and productive for a long time to come.
So you mentioned an Alberta pension plan, among other things, the immigration issue. Jason Kenney has said that he supports, or at least is signaling that his government supports an Alberta pension plan, an Alberta police force, and he's even slightly reduced the immigration certificates that are being awarded. What will the Wildrose Independence Party do that is different so that they can stand out? Will they outright support a sovereign Alberta?
Well, I guess I have to ask, what support is he giving when he's the one in position to do? We will do it. We will give notification, and I think that we could change the police force in a matter of months. We need to give 2 years notice. I think it's a total of $145 million a year. I think we can negotiate out of that, and there'll be lots of people that would actually just transfer over. I've talked to RCMP individuals, and they said, oh, I'd be happy to transfer over. I'm so sick and tired of dealing with our system and from Ottawa. And so it's not about talking about support, it's about talking about actually doing. We need to start doing things, and Jason is our premier, and he's the one who can do it. He could commission tomorrow, say we're going to start our Alberta Revenue Agency, and he could start collecting all of the provincial employees, from our nurses to our teachers, and start collecting all of that, and then we could get it set up, and then we can collect everything from Albertans that have the Canadian tax. And all of those things can be done. And so I don't understand when he says I support it, but he doesn't do it. What does that mean? Like, okay, I'm not in a position to do it? No. He actually can lead and do it. If he won't, we will.
I think you're referring to his panel obsession. Jason Kenney has announced panel after panel, so you're saying that you want to see more action on it.
Absolutely. Well, he said, like, the turning point for me is when he was on Danielle Smith's show, and he says that, I think that a police force could be good, but we need to do deep studies. We need to look at these things more and analyze them. And they might cost more. I don't think they will. But even if they do, we need our own security here in Alberta. We can't count on Ottawa. We don't want to be dependent on Ottawa for our health care. We don't want it for our environmental protection things here. We don't need Ottawa's interference to look after our house.
Thanks so much, Paul. So, Rob, you're here today at the Firewall Plus roundtable discussion in Calgary. What brings you here today?
Well, I think we've got a growing movement in the province where people want to have more autonomy, more sovereignty, more independence. I'm going to be doing a presentation with regard to policing and as well the reserves. When it comes to policing, for $100 million more than we pay the RCMP right now, we could have our own force. And with regard to the reserves, for example, for about $1 billion, you could have your own military. right? And when you think we send anywhere from 20 to 40 billion dollars to Ottawa, that means that instead of sending 20 billion, we're sending 18.9, and we have our own police and military. It's kind of a no-brainer.
Are you advocating for outright separation and sovereignty, or are you just looking at this from a financial perspective, saying it's possible?
The more that Alberta controls her own destiny, the better, as far as I'm concerned.
Thanks so much for tuning in to Rebel News here at the Firewall Plus convention. If you want to stay up to date with the latest news, be sure to like and subscribe to us here on YouTube, but also click that notification bell. If you do that, you'll stay up to date with all of the news as it breaks when it happens.